Hey friend, welcome to Church at Home. It's great to connect with you. I want to let you know that you're in the right place because God has a message for you in your life that you need to hear today. But right now, I'm going to give you a couple minutes to get a drink of coffee or water or tea or pop or soda. Invite someone to join us with a text, and please share this video. It helps so much. And then we're going to get started. So thank you so much for being here. It's going to be an amazing day. Well, let's go. It is time for Church at Home. The mission of Family Church is to be the easiest place to experience the love and forgiveness that Jesus offers each and every one of us. And we want to help you take your next step on your faith journey. We all know that life can be complicated sometimes, and we want to help you get it right. We want to help you win in the areas that matter most. And that comes by looking to Jesus. We are a Jesus church, and we found that following Jesus makes your life better and makes you better at life. It doesn't mean that things are always easy. We all know there's trials and adversity, but it does make your life better. By obeying his word, not just knowing some of the stuff in the Bible, but by listening and obeying, put it into a practice, applying it to our lives, that is life-changing. And it leads to peace that surpasses all circumstances and understanding, and joy that nothing can take away. If you're new with us, a special welcome to you. We're so glad that you're here. My favorite thing about Church at Home is how many new people we have joining us each week. And we love to hear from you. We love to connect with you. We appreciate you, and we have a gift for you. So if you're new, please let us know, and we'll hook you up with a free gift. Thank you so much for being here. But everybody, go ahead and right now, give us an emoji in the comments so we know that you're here. Whatever your favorite emoji is, put your emoji right now in the chat so we can engage and connect and see everyone. Thank you for being here. It's going to be a great day. And right now, I also want you to tag someone that you miss. It's hard not being in the building, so if there is someone that you wish you could give a big high five or a virtual hug to, tag them right now in the comments. Let them know that you're thinking about them and that you love them. And it's so great to be able to engage with each other with the comments online. So it is time for Go Kids. So let's go to Pastor Jessica.
Hi, Go Kids. Man, there were some amazing fireworks happening last night. What's your favorite part of celebrating the 4th of July? Is it getting together with friends and family and having a big barbecue? Or setting off a big row of black cats? Or maybe it's the big fireworks display at the end of the night. I like writing my name with sparklers and eating a ton of watermelon. The 4th of July is all about celebrating the independence of our country from the rule of England. We live in a pretty great country. We're able to do a lot of things that other countries aren't allowed to do, like what we're doing today, worshiping Jesus together. But did you know there's something even greater than independence? It's freedom. You're probably wondering what the difference is between independence and freedom. The definition of independence is free from outside control. It's not depending on another's authority, while freedom is defined as the power or right to act, speak, or think as one wants. Doesn't that mean pretty much the same thing? Well, not quite. Let me tell you about what happened to one of Jesus's disciples to help us understand this a little better. In Acts 12, the Bible tells us about when Peter was arrested by King Herod. Peter was going around telling everyone how Jesus had risen from the dead. He was the Messiah sent from God to save them and the true King of Kings. King Herod and many of the Jews were furious with Peter, so Herod had him arrested. When the guards brought Peter to the jail, they bound him in chains and locked him in the cell. On the night before Herod was going to bring him out to have him killed, here Peter was, chained up between two guards, locked inside a jail cell that had more soldiers guarding the door. There was no way for escape. Or at least that's what Herod thought. In the middle of the night, while Peter was sleeping, an angel sent by God entered the jail cell and woke Peter. Immediately the chains fell off. Peter thought he was dreaming. What was happening? The angel told Peter to get dressed and follow him. But what about the guards? Surely they would see them and stop them. Peter and the angel walked right out of the jail, right past the guards, all the way to the gate of the city that opened on its own. He was free. When the angel of the Lord came into the jail cell and the chains fell off of Peter, he had gained his independence. He was free from the outside control that was keeping him in the jail cell. But what would keep him from being caught and being returned to those chains? Power. God's power is what blinded the guards as Peter and the angel walked past. God's power is what opened the city gate on its own. Power is the difference between independence and freedom. 2 Corinthians 3:17 says, "The Lord is the Spirit, and where the Spirit of the Lord is, there is freedom." Say that with me. The Lord is the Spirit, and where the Spirit of the Lord is, there is freedom. Sin has a way of chaining us up and making us slaves. We keep sinning over and over and over. The only way to have true freedom and to break those chains of sin is to allow God's power, His Spirit in us, to lead us out. Remember that song we sing? I'm free to run, I'm free to dance, I'm free to live for you. Run from temptation, dance and praise instead, and live like Jesus. Your room isn't your jail cell, and your parents aren't guards, no matter how much it may feel like it at times. So, what kind of freedom do you need? Well, what a great question for a challenge. Think of a sin that you struggle with, an area that you're not allowing God's power to lead you to freedom. Tell your parents and ask them to pray with you. When Peter was in jail, his friends were meeting together to pray for him. I'll be praying for you this week too, and I can't wait to see you all very soon.
I love food. And yesterday was a pretty big day for food with the holiday cookouts and picnics and potlucks and everything. So since we all want to know, go ahead and put it in the comments right now. What's the best thing that you ate yesterday? Maybe you had some barbecue. Maybe you were chowing down on some burgers and dogs. Maybe there was some killer potato salad, some watermelon with the salt sprinkled on it. Or if there was homemade ice cream, I definitely need to know about that. So I'm going to ask you a question right now. And I think I know the answer, but since I can be insecure at times, go ahead and say what the best thing you ate is yesterday. And the next question I have is a little bit more important, and that question is, has Family Church blessed you in any way since we started in March? Church at Home, has it encouraged you? Has it strengthened you or helped you? If it has, please let us know, because we absolutely love hearing comments and stories about how Church at Home is working or blessing you or speaking into your life. It's like literal energy for Pastor Curtis, right? He may be laying on the couch, resting his eyes while snoring like us dads do. And then you could tell him a story. Hey, I heard so-and-so had been watching Church at Home, and they mentioned about how much they look forward to it each week. And he will get excited like his battery pack just got recharged to 100%. And that's true for all of us on the leadership team. We love hearing those stories. It's like food for our soul when we hear how Family Church at Home is blessing those in our community and encouraging and strengthening them. Another thing that I'm going to ask you to consider, besides sharing your story, because we want to hear from you, is to consider giving. Now, I'm not going to shy away from talking about money because it's the opportunity for you to partner with us in a big eternal impact work and an impact in our community that truly makes a difference. And it's also an opportunity for you to be blessed. Matthew 10:42 says, "And if anyone gives even a little cup of cold water to one of these little ones, who is my disciple, truly I tell you, that person will certainly not lose their reward." Throughout the Bible, it is clear that when you are generous, you will be rewarded, both later in this life and in eternity in heaven. So will you please consider giving today? Moving forward, whenever we're back consistently meeting in our church building, we want you to come check it out in person and enjoy our incredible Sunday morning experience of worshiping God together and being together and hearing the message. But we are also going to continue to offer Church at Home that for those, for whatever reason, cannot be present in person in the building. But to do that, to truly execute that program and service, it does take some technology and equipment that we need to purchase to get us connected to be able to offer that to you. We are excited about doing it. We know God is going to continue to work and bless it in our community in a powerful way to change lives, to bring freedom and transformation through Jesus into people's lives. So thank you for giving, for your generosity and support that allows this great work to be carried out to improve and make our community better, all for Jesus and the kingdom of heaven. You can give online at familychurch.xyz/give. Well, it's time for the final message of 3 questions about God, so let's go to Pastor Curtis.
Good morning, everyone. Welcome to Family Church. We're so glad you decided to hang out with us this morning for a little bit. We're actually concluding a short series we began a couple of weeks ago where we've been trying to answer 3 of the most common questions that people have about God. In week 1, we launched the series by answering the question, who is he? Who is God? And we actually let Jesus answer that question for us. And what Jesus said was the best way to understand who God is by viewing him as a father. Not your earthly father, but your heavenly father. Who is God? Jesus would say, he's your heavenly father. Then last week, the question we wrestled with was, is it worth it? Is it worth following Jesus? Because everyone at some point in time has to answer that question. And so again, we look to Jesus to help answer the question. And what Jesus said was, yes, it is absolutely worth it to follow me. If, but this is a big if, but if we understand that we can't ever fully embrace the new life that he offers us, that abundant life to the fullest, life to the fullest, we'll never be able to embrace that until we fully let go of our old life. And when we finally figure that out and decide to go all in, to quit sitting on the sidelines, to quit sitting at the edge of the pool, just dipping our toes in occasionally, but just deciding to abandon ourselves and our life to God and jump into the deep end, knowing that he'll be there to catch us, that's when we discover that, yes, it is worth it to follow Jesus. And then this morning, we're going to conclude the series by looking at the question, does he have a plan for me? Does God have a plan for my life? You know, one of the challenges when trying to answer this question is it's such a subjective thing. His plan for me will be different than his plan for you. So it's sometimes hard to get some guidance when it comes to dialing in God's plan for us. And that can sometimes get us into trouble. It got me into trouble a few years ago. Not long into our marriage, we were serving as youth pastors in Duncan, Oklahoma at the time, and we had been there almost 2.5 years. Things weren't going real well, and there were a lot of different reasons for that, but we began sensing a disconnect with the church that we were at. And we had just lost a full-term stillborn child a couple months earlier, and I didn't realize it at the time, but looking back, I see how God orchestrated events in a way that led us away from our ministry there and into something different, because we needed a change of scenery. But my idea of a change of scenery and God's idea of a change of scenery were apparently different. This was my idea of a change of scenery. This is a picture of Lake Netta in Ham Lake, Minnesota. And this is exactly where we moved to. We had some friends that lived up in this area and had gone up there on vacation to visit them before. So after a few months of continuing to try and minister and serve at the church that we were at, ministry frustration was setting in, and I started planning an exit strategy. And my exit strategy included a move over 800 miles away to Lake Netta, Minnesota. And full disclosure here, it wasn't a real popular decision. Sue was willing to go with me because she was and still is a very supportive wife and companion. But I think I can honestly say that she would have been elated had we moved somewhere closer. So we packed up all our belongings, put them in a Ryder 25-foot rental truck, and headed north. Sue still shares the story about pulling out of the driveway of her parents' house, and her parents were standing there waving at us. Her dad is in tears, watching in agony as his no-good son-in-law is dragging his only daughter and only grandchild at that time over 800 miles away. We got moved in, we got settled in, started serving as youth pastors at a church in Anoka, Minnesota, but it wasn't a paid position, so I got a job with a friend of mine to help pay for my ministry habit. Fast forward a little, I don't recall exactly how long we had been living up there when this happened, but it wasn't very long. I was riding home from work one day when God very clearly told me that I had missed it, that we weren't supposed to be living in Minnesota. He didn't say where we were supposed to be, but I just knew we weren't supposed to be where we were. And as soon as he told me, and it wasn't an audible voice, just one of those very strong impressions that sometimes you get, and you know it was God, and it was so impactful that I remember a lot about the moment. I mean, it was a traumatic moment for me. I remember everything about it. I was with my good friend and his brother. We were carpooling home from work. Van Halen was playing on the radio. Jump was blasting. I don't know why I remember all that, but I do. And I know it was God who's speaking to me because I didn't have to argue with him. I knew it was God because I actually knew it was true. Deep down, I knew I had messed up God's plan for our lives. So what do I do with that? I don't recall if it was that same evening or not, but I had to tell my wife. I had to have that conversation that no husband, no dad ever wants to have. Admit that you missed it, that you messed up God's plan. I don't recall exactly how the conversation went, but I was very honest with Sue. I said, honey, I missed it. And one of the reasons I know I missed it is because out of the blue, I found myself pondering the idea of going back to school and finishing my degree. I only had an associate's degree at the time, and I wanted to finish my bachelor's. So at that time, there were 2 schools in the United States that would accept the credits of my associate's degree at Christ for the Nations. And those 2 schools were Life College in Van Nuys, California, and Southwestern Assemblies of God University in Waxahachie, Texas. And that was God's plan for my life. I just didn't realize it. So I started getting all the information together, my transcripts, etc., and applied to Southwestern University. I got accepted, but by then Sue was like 6 or 7 months pregnant with Evan, so there's no way we're going to move right then. So I made plans to enroll for the spring semester in January. And so in late December of 1984, I loaded up another Ryder 25-foot rental truck, and we moved 1,000 miles back south to Waxahachie, Texas. Now, I share that story because I think it underscores the fact that so many people do ask the question, does God have a plan for me? So that's what we're going to talk about this morning, God's plan for you. Because we all, come on, you know this, even if we've never verbalized it, we've all pondered the question, does God really have a plan for me? And it's funny because we usually don't have a problem believing God has a plan for someone else, but us, I'm not so sure. Why is that? Why is it easier for us to accept that God has a plan for someone else, but not for us? Well, I think there are a few reasons. One reason we do this is because we don't know the plan. We don't know it. And this would be all you type A folks, those of us that function better when we're in control of things, right? And if we don't know the plan, we'll have doubts about the plan. So some don't know the plan, and then there are those who don't believe there is a plan. Some of you might be in this category, and that's all right. I mean, I get it. I look around the world now, and I certainly can see why someone would say, man, I don't believe that God has a plan when I watch David Muir on the evening national news and see what's taking place around the world. I can see why people would push back against the idea that God has a plan, period, let alone a plan for them. Some don't know the plan. Some don't believe there's a plan. And then there are those who would say, yeah, I believe he has a plan, but I messed it up. I messed it up. I started out all right. I was locked in. I was committed to God's plan. But then something happened that led to a bad choice or a series of bad choices. And the consequences of those choices have brought me to the place where I think I've screwed up and messed up God's plan. I'm thinking about these 3 categories cover about everyone when it comes to answering the question, does God have a plan for my life? But the reason that we have doubts about God's plan for our life is because when we look at our life, where we are today, very seldom does it line up with what we thought God's plan was for our life. There's this thing on social media called hashtag what I ordered versus what I got or something like that. And it's all these people's testimonies and pictures of something that they ordered online, and then next to it is the picture of what they actually were sent or what they actually got. Like this gal who ordered a flower arrangement that was supposed to look like a lion and ended up getting this sorry looking thing. Or how about this guy who ordered some patio chairs for this deck and they sent him this. Or the person who ordered this huge fluffy stuffed bear and ended up getting this delivered. The point being, we can all relate to those times where we can step back and take a look at our life and it just doesn't seem to line up with what we thought we had for God's plan for our life, what we thought God's plan was for our life. Times where we find ourselves in life and it just doesn't seem to line up with what we ordered or what we thought we were ordering, what we signed up for. And before long, we're doubting that God even has a plan for our lives at all. And honestly, it doesn't take much to get us sidetracked from God's plan. Disruptions come in all shapes and sizes. To sort of help illustrate this point, I borrowed some wrenches from our local mechanic ninja from Whalen Automotive in beautiful downtown Wellsville. Thanks, Robert, for loaning me these. But in our culture, we have a saying to describe what happens when we encounter unexpected disruptions and a plan gets sabotaged or ruined. And we talk about how a wrench got thrown into the gears or thrown into our plan. And you know, these wrenches can come in different sizes, right? And the sizes of these disruptions will greatly determine their impact on us. For example, sometimes we might have a minor disruption, right? Like when you realize that the shirt that you were going to wear to work that morning was still in the wash, it never got put in the dryer. No biggie, you can still manage and navigate that situation fairly easily. You can work around that. But then there are disruptions that are a little bit more challenging, a little bit bigger wrench, like coming out of the grocery store or Walmart with a bunch of groceries and frozen food and walking up to your car and seeing it has a flat tire. Again, nothing life-threatening, but still there's a lot of angst with the inconvenience of that, right? And then there are those larger disruptions that get thrown into what we thought was God's plan. You know, you thought you had a plan, but then you got the notice from work that you no longer had a job. You thought you had a plan, but then you got the divorce notice from your spouse's attorney. You thought you had a plan, but then came the infertility issues. You thought you had a plan, but your plan didn't include chemo treatments or radiation. You thought you had a plan, but then a close family member passed suddenly and unexpectedly. You know, I'm willing to bet that everyone watching right now has experienced one of these large wrench experiences. You've experienced a disruption. You've experienced a wrench thrown into your plans. And the really tragic thing is when this happens, when we get these large disruptions, sometimes it can cause us to doubt God's plan from the beginning. That everything that's happened thus far is null and void. It was all a sham. That's what the devil would tell us. It was all bogus from the get-go. But if you're watching right now and you doubt whether or not God has a plan for your life, or maybe you thought he did, but then had one of these thrown in, right? And life today for you looks vastly different than how you thought it would. And now you wonder if it was even legit in the first place. If that's you, I want you to know that you're not alone. You're not the first person, nor will you be the last person to experience this. In fact, the guy who wrote most of the New Testament actually experienced this. That's right. His name was Paul, used to be Saul, but God changed his life so radically that he had to change his name as well. But the Apostle Paul was a guy who was totally and completely locked in on God's plan for his life. And that plan was to take the good news of Jesus Christ to the Gentile world. And Paul was all in on this plan. But Paul also had a few of these along the way. But with Paul, there were no small wrenches with Paul. They were all big. For example, here were some of Paul's wrenches. He was unjustly thrown into prison, flogged, whipped 39 times, beaten with rods 3 times, almost stoned to death, shipwrecked 3 times. Paul endured all this and more, all while pursuing God's plan for his life. If nothing else, what we learn from this, what we talked about last week when we answered the question, is it worth it? Because implied in that question is the reality that there's a cost involved. There are times it will absolutely cost us to follow Jesus. And since following Jesus is following his plan, then you could say that God's plan has a cost as well. But if anyone knew that God's plan included interruptions, it was the Apostle Paul. But the reason he was able to continue on, even though all the hardship and heartache of what he endured, all the wrenches that got thrown into that plan, the reason that he was able to stay laser focused on God's plan was because he had something bigger and better than a plan. He had a hope in the promise that trusting God's plan would always work out better no matter what things currently looked like. Actually, here's how he worded it in Romans 8, verse 28. And we know that for those who love God, all things work together for good. In other words, Paul was confident that God's plan would always be worth it no matter what. Paul realized that if the only way to have confidence in God's plan for his life was by accepting the fact that somehow, some way behind the scenes, God was at work, then that's what he was going to do. Even during the difficult times, especially during the difficult times. So let me encourage you, those of you who have allowed some of the larger disruptions to get you sidetracked or maybe off track, let me encourage you by assuring you that God is working even through those disruptions, no matter how big or small. Don't abandon the plan because of disruptions. It may not feel good, it may not seem good at the time, but the promise is that God is somehow working it for your good. And then the next part of the verse, he tells us what that thing is that's better than a plan, even better than God's plan. Let's read it. For those who are called according to his, and here it is, what's better than God's plan? God's purpose. Those that are called according to his purpose. The reason Paul could press on through all the disruptions he encountered while pursuing God's plan was because what he was doing was for a purpose. But you understand this better than you realize. After all, when you get to the end of your life, as you reflect back over the number of years that the Lord gave you, taking inventory of the life that you lived, would you rather say that you lived a life full of plans or that you lived a life full of purpose? Plans can tank on you. Plans can be messed up by having some of these thrown into them. But purpose lasts forever. And dear ones, the reason why you're going to endure what you're going through right now is not because of a plan, but because of a purpose, a God-ordained purpose. Here's the deal. God has something far better than a plan for your life. He has a purpose for your life. And for those who feel like you threw a wrench in God's plan and messed it up, that's okay, because God still has a purpose. And when we have a purpose, there'll always be a plan. So if having a purpose is better than having a plan, then what is God's purpose for me? He tells us in the next verse, in Romans 8, verse 29, for those whom he foreknew, he also predestined to be conformed to the image of his Son. Paul knew that the purpose for his life was to become more like Jesus, to be conformed to the image of Jesus Christ. The reason Paul could continue pressing on, even through those disruptions that seem mild compared to our disruptions, but the reason that Paul could continue on was because he knew that it was all for a purpose. The purpose of making him more like Jesus Christ. In other words, there is no disruption big enough or even small enough to distract you and get you off track from the purpose that God has for you. Doesn't matter what things look like right now. The end result of what you're going through will make you more like Jesus. What we view as disruptions, God views as opportunities. Opportunities for molding us into the image of his Son. I know you think the divorce sabotaged the plan, but God still got a purpose. I know you think the infertility wrecked the plan, but God still has a purpose. I know you think losing your job sidetracked the plan, but God still has a purpose. What we view as something that blows up the plan, God views as something to fulfill his purpose. So, when life disrupts the plan, look for God's purpose. So I want to leave you with this question. What disruption are you going through now that God can use to conform you to his image? The reason why we can have confidence that all things are working together for my good is because we know God's purpose is still at work, no matter what happened to the plan. Does God have a plan for my life? The answer is yes. But it's better than that, because he not only has a plan for you, he has a purpose as well. And as long as we're pursuing God's purpose, his plan will eventually be accomplished. Earlier I mentioned how I had thrown a huge wrench into God's plan for our lives and how I had to go and confess this to my wife. But honestly, looking back on those 10 or 11 months that we lived in Ham Lake, Minnesota, because of some things that had happened again at the church that we had been at before, and because of losing the stillborn child, we were at a place where we just needed to heal and be restored. And that's exactly what God did for us at Praise Fellowship in Anoka, Minnesota. Pastors George and Kathy Ridge, thank you so much for taking us in, loving on us, and giving us an opportunity to serve and be healed as well. We're forever grateful for the friendships that we made during that time of living in Minnesota. And our friends Rick and Joan Krantz, who were instrumental in our healing process as well, whether they realized it or not. So I say that to say that even during that time of God's plan being sabotaged, as far as I could tell. Even during that time, he was still able to use it to heal us and prepare us for the greater purpose that he had for our lives. As I was putting this together, the timeline for all this, and trying to recall how it played out, moving to Minnesota, then moving back to Texas, when I got done, I couldn't help but think how much similar this looks to the children of Israel taking 40 years and how many miles to complete a 7 to 10 day journey, and how it took me a year and 1,800 miles to take what should have been a 3 hour and 175 mile trip. So this is your choice. You can continue to view the disruptions that come your way, the wrenches that get tossed into the gears. You can view them as something that ruined the plan, and maybe it did. But because of God's purpose, he's able to take that wrench and go to work on us and make us more like his son. So here's your homework this week. I'd like for you to do 3 things. First, let God be your good, loving Father. Begin to view him as a loving Heavenly Father who cares for you. Second, believe the life that he's trying to hand you is so much better than the life you're holding on to. And then third, allow God to use the disruptions in your life to mold you into the image of his son, Jesus Christ. So, does God have a plan for your life? I don't know. But I know he's got something so much bigger and better, and that's his purpose. So let me pray for you. Heavenly Father, I pray for those people watching now who have pondered the question, does God have a plan for me? I also pray for those who believe you had a plan but think that they've somehow messed that plan up. Show them that you've got something better than a plan. You have a purpose. And as long as we have purpose, then your plan will always be redeemable. And if there's anyone watching this morning who has never considered or pondered the idea that you might have a plan or purpose for them, I pray that they might be willing to look to you and make a move towards you. And as they do, I pray that you would honor that and begin to reveal yourself, your love, your grace, and your forgiveness, and yes, your plan and purpose to them. And that the way to move towards you is by inviting you or re-inviting you into your heart and into your life. Ask him that now. Ask him to help bring you back to that place of living for and serving him. Because no matter where we're at in our relationship with God, we need to recognize that whether we're pursuing a specific plan or not, this we know, God has a purpose for me. Lord bless you.
Thank you so much for engaging with us today. Thanks for being here. Go ahead and tag someone in the comments or share this right now with someone that needs to watch it later. Text them, send them this in a message, and let them know that they need to watch this. You can follow along with us on Facebook. Check out our website, and we'll see you again soon. Thanks for being here. Have a great week.
every knee will bow, every tongue will confess. Amen? Yeah. For who can stop the Lord Almighty? Who can stop the Lord Almighty? Who can stop the Lord Almighty? No one. Who can stop? Sing it